want to use the mic, because if we don't, the remote audience will not be able to hear. So I want to now pass around the mic for any kind of observation or theme that came up in your small group conversations.
Hi, thanks. I'm Leslie Ackerman from Alternatives Federal Credit Union in Ithaca, New York, and how I answered the first question about where have I seen the future is with the time bank that recently launched in Ithaca, whereby I can contribute an hour of my time doing something for someone, and I get credit to use an hour of someone else's time. And the idea is that everybody's time has value, whether you're a rocket scientist or a janitor, you can contribute and trade in an economy. And lo and behold, I was sitting next to the gentleman who invented the concept. And that was so exciting, and it just sort of fed both of our gross national happiness. So.
I have one too, if anybody has something they want to share.
In the early 70s, I was heavily involved in alternative currencies. And an alternative currency is legal in the United States if $1 of your new currency equals $1 of US money. So that means also that it's taxable. So whatever you do in the alternative currency becomes completely taxable. So we were thinking like, well, how can we make it non-taxable? And I said, well, since I'm an accountant and do taxes and stuff, I know that the IRS, if you do something like improve your house, you don't get to count your time at all. They value your time at 0. So I said, if we had a thing where we just traded time instead of dollars, the IRS already defined it as equaling 0. And la, 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 it's now tax-free. And it stood up a couple times in the tax courts that the IRS defines our efforts as valueless.
Thank you.
Over here. Oh, keep it next.
Hi, I'm Joe Romano from Ithaca, New York, at Green Star Cooperative Market and Local First Ithaca. My answer for where I have seen the future is in community. Yeah, I work at a co-op. We have almost 9,000 members of a 29,000 member. I'm sorry, the crying thing has caught up with me, and it does here sometimes too. But to see, a business that is started by the people of our community that is so strong and is now, a food co-op, but also a force for good in so many ways, helping everyone from farmers, community groups, partnering with everyone. We have a 501c3. It's a vital institution, and seeing the members of the community engage in such a thing, and there's so many ways that we're working on just about every issue that we talk about here. I see the future there, and I do see the millennials getting involved in the movement as well with a passion, and I see the future there.
Hi, my name's Anthony Upwood, and I'm from Toronto, Canada. And I was fortunate earlier this week to be at a conference called Accelerating Collaboration for Sustainability, organized by the Natural Step Canada. And we had some similarly very wonderful people speaking with us and collaborating with us. Dr. Karl-Henrik Robert from the Natural Step, and Goran Borhan as well from Sweden. And several people in Q&A panels from that group were asked questions like, so what does leadership for sustainability, what does leadership for collaboration look like? And everybody started answering by saying, it's all about personal development, it's all about the inner journey. And I come here this morning and I hear the speakers say almost exactly the same thing. And I'm getting goosebumps right now because when you said last night something is dying and something is being born, that was almost to the word what Goran Borhan said to us on Tuesday night in the closing speech of this other conference. I mean, almost to the word. It was uncanny. And that to me says that the shift is really starting to happen, that we have such a different set of people coming from such a different set of places, and they're all saying the same thing.
Hi, my name is Kim Latham. Interesting, I just came from Brattleboro, Vermont last week, also at a conference, and it was the same. At the conclusion was the same thing. It's an inner transformation. So again, I was amazed how we started out this conference in this way. And one of the things that I brought forth is also time banks that I've seen. I've helped to start a time bank in my community, and it's amazing how it's generated so much excitement. And finally, after working in my community for 3.5 years to get people to actually step up and volunteer and take a leadership position, people are actually excited about it and are doing that, and it's really taking off. So time banks, I love the concept of time banks because all time is valued equally, and it makes people shift their mind. Like, some people don't get it right away, but once people do, it's really exciting to see what happens, that they start to think in a totally different way. So.
Thank you. I'm Susan Witt from the Schumacher. Okay.
This one also did that before.
Okay. I'm Susan Witt from the Schumacher Center for New Economics. And I've been at this work for 33 years, land reform, monetary reform. I've been a part of BALLE since Lori and Judy called meeting up on the North Shore of Boston. And one of the things we've got at the Schumacher Center is Schumacher's personal library. And it's a library not on economics, but a library on the great religions and philosophies from all cultures. These are the books he was reading to shape a new economics. They're the books I was reading. They're the books our board members were reading. But in our work, we didn't talk about those books or talk about those ideas. We talked about the techniques that we came up with. Why do a local currency? Why is it good for your community? How does it actually work? What about the community land trust lease agreements? What are the legal forms? So our public persona was always the technique. And much of the conversation at BALLE over the years has also been on those techniques for shaping new businesses. Sure, the ideals were embedded, but the techniques were there. What I've been feeling over the last year, well, last maybe 6 months, and was crystallized this morning, was that it's time to speak out of the vision. There's an urgency to speak out of the vision. And that's not sentimental. It's clear. It's spiritually clear what needs to be done, how it needs to move forward, and the urgency of it. And all the speakers this morning spoke like that. And I thought, we're in something new. We're in something new as a movement, and it'll take us all rising to it. And I've spent I don't know, the last 2 hours just going over all the programs that I'm working with and thinking, how can I change the language? How can I change the way I'm communicating about it? It was that powerful. So thank you all.
As I was driving here from Albany, I went through the Montezuma Wildlife Preserve, which is a vast wetland that's been preserved for a long time. And while I was going through it, I had the thought, well, I'm in the future now, because this is going to be preserved just like this, hundreds of years from now. So in a way, there are people that had even more visionary visions way before us that have helped preserve and get us going.
Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Sarah Hakel. I'm from Buffalo, New York here, and an agent of transformation. I just want to speak to what you were speaking to about it is time for us all to step in fully and step forward, and it's up to every one of us. I just was at a dance conference in Montreal, and Kwenda Lima, who's a mastermind for transformation through movement, was talking about, you know, spirituality isn't just a 10-day retreat that we go to because we're stressed out. Spirituality is every moment of every day, and that's how we can choose to live our lives. We can make such a huge vibratory impact on the whole universe just by choosing in a direction that feels highly aligned, or, you know, with the beauty of our mind is a great tool, as Eckhart Tolle says, and then the wisdom, the inherent wisdom that we all have, we can make choices that are in alignment and forwarding the motion, midwifing this new way that's coming into being, that's birthing forward. And I feel like there's one more thought that I wanted to share. Communication is a huge element of that. So I think it's the way that we speak to ourselves, the relationship that we have with ourselves, and then how that moves forward out into our daily lives. So the power is here, and it's in all of us now.
Thank you, Susan, for your comments about changing the language, because that's something I've been sitting with for quite a while, and I realized that, and Gar Alperovitz was challenging me to lead with systemic change, but now I'm also hearing about personal transformation being maybe equally important. You know, just a few weeks ago, a bridge section collapsed into the Skagit River in western Washington. And that underscored for me the challenge that we're up against. Many people may not realize this, but the truck that hit the bridge section that caused the collapse was actually hauling tar sands equipment. And so for me, it's like I feel, and this was before coming to this conference, that was like underscoring, it was like the last straw in what was the 6-month progression of my going deep into despair and grief around climate change. And Michelle, thanks for bringing this onto the table. And I have done so much personal work, but not enough, to try and to build my leadership skills, build my organizing skills, build an understanding of the world. And then I got to where I felt like I've done everything that I can do in my personal life in terms of like changing light bulbs and like community solar projects and like a bunch of things I've done, and I go, wait, where is everyone? I got to where I can argue that I'm carbon neutral in my home, except for flying here. And I go, where is everyone? And I went to to these conferences, and I'm like, and I've been in conversations. I'm like, where are the people where's the hope? And not even hope, but where is the solidarity? And I keep finding myself coming to this conference. This is my 7th conference. I've been to many, and I keep coming back, and I'm continuously surprised at how the conversation stays on the leading edge. So for me, the answer to the question of where are the seeds of change, they are right here, and I feel it in my own heart, not just about local living economies, but about the entire conversation of a global transformation. Thank you.
Hello. So I wanted to tell a quick story about, I'm blessed to have little people in my life. And when I think about a glimpse of the future, I'm like, oh, duh, I see it all the time. They're 6 and 8. But my little 6-year-old, we were doing the March Against Monsanto like 2 weeks ago. And like every little kid, why? Why are we doing this? Why? And so I go through and I'm like, well, this is what's going on. And what should we put on this sign? And we're talking about it. And the sign ended up saying, seeds are already amazing. And it was like so cute. And she ended up that morning finishing her first knitting project. And she was so proud that she marched with the sign and her knitting project in her hands. And I took a photo at the end of the march, and she's just like the proudest stance and look. And this is all her being out there. And the next week she had her kindergarten graduation, and we had to choose a photo for the classroom. And we're looking at all the photos, and I'm laying them all out, and that one's like in the corner, that photo, and she's like, I want that one. And I was just like so proud of her, and it was all her own being. Like she owned it, and it was her manifesting the future that we want, actually. I was just really impressed. So.
Hi, this is Nipun. I just want to share a quick story from a data point from a different part of the ecosystem, the larger global ecosystem, the technology world. So on Facebook, people post 4.5 billion status updates every day. Out of those 4.5 billion status updates, 20% have emoticons. But those emoticons have been outdated, like there was no emoticon for gratitude. Right? There was no emoticon for beauty. There was no emoticon for joy. Like these kinds of things didn't. So Facebook decides that, look, we need to bring more compassion into our ecosystem because there's just a lot of noise which is dragging their whole social network down. And so they've designed new emoticons. And so even in a very different part of the world, this idea of inner transformation is really resonating, and people are all saying, like, we really need to step up. So it's just a different data point.
Okay, we have time for one more voice, and then we'll go into 2 more stories.
Hello, I'm Jenny Mish, and my grandparents were economic visionaries, did work with cooperatives. I grew up at a natural food cooperative. When I was a teenage activist, I concluded at the end of my first campaign that the best thing that I could do for the world was to work on myself. And I've been doing that alongside community organizing and other good work for a number of years. So I'm really deeply moved to hear this inner transformation theme coming out of the closet. I decided at some point to understand more fully how the mainstream economic system works, and I'm just ending now a period of several years getting a PhD and then being a faculty member at one of the most prestigious business schools in the country. And it was very painful, actually, to see how those business leaders are being socialized and where the hearts shut down. And as I come off of that experience and make a transition back into community work, I have been on retreat and asking this question, this second question. And the image that has been really haunting me is the image of soil health. And in particular, the mycorrhizal fungi, and how so the soil health metaphor is really feeding me personally in terms of what I need to do is to nurture my soil health and not worry about what plants I'm supposed to be growing. And the mycorrhizal fungi and the other nurturing of the soil, literally the soil is what will bring the carbon from the atmosphere back to the earth. And this soil health metaphor, I keep listening for what is nurturing soil health for our economy, for our economic system. What does it mean? What is the mycorrhizal fungi of our new economic system? And I'm thinking we're speaking it here. So.
Thanks, I promised to be fast, but I wanted to build on that. Hi everyone, I'm Colleen from Philadelphia. And I work at the Wharton School of Business as part of the work that I do, and we're coaching. We have 42 coaches in a new program coaching the MBA students. When the MBA students come into Wharton, they're very focused on finance, they're very focused on their own ambitions. And just in the course of the 2 years that we've been running this program, we have seen amazing growth in the students. We're coaching about 540 of the 800 MBA students in their first year. And they're starting to ask questions about, how can I create more meaning in my life? How can I create an organization that's neither a nonprofit nor a for-profit? How can I go back and change the way we're looking at business? So I tell you, we are transforming. And these are the future business leaders. So I wanted to add on to that because I know what it's like to work in these places. So I'm seeing the future there.
Thank you. So I want, in a moment, invite 2 more voices and stories into our conversation. From entrepreneurs, from Matt and from Eileen. And as a way of transitioning, I want to share with you, kind of listening kind of to this touching base that we just had together, a few observations. Kind of the first one are feelings, really. The first one is that I felt, kind of listening, there was really, yes, yesterday we talked about a moment of disruption, but what just became apparent in listening to each other is the lineage that we are part of. So that we are not alone. And what I also feel is the gratefulness for the torch that has been passing on, and that are we passing on to the next generations. Now, just in, observing it more from the outside and maybe also linking it to a framework, which always is part of a conversation. Another observation is, as some of you mentioned, we have been for many years discussed about the ecological divide and the social divide, but what comes into the conversation now also is the third one that we didn't talk about. That's the spiritual divide, and that the source of those kind of, it relates kind of with the disconnect to nature, the disconnect between self and other, but this one really is the disconnect between self and self. And when Michelle talked this morning about the sources of happiness, it really is about kind of connecting or bridging or kind of reconnecting these divides. So that's so that the third one is coming into focus. So that's another observation that many of you commented on, and that I'm also feeling. The third one is this kind of, there's like on a structural, when you look at the new economics conversation and the new economy movement, they're like we used to be organized in a lot of single issue movements, right? So for one group of people, it's all about money, and if we only fix that, then the whole capitalism problem is solved. And then the next one is all about entrepreneurship, and then it's all about food or agriculture, and or energy, and it's all about technology for another group, or leadership for yet another. So we know, or it's consumerism and more conscious, collaborative consuming. So I think what I'm noticing is that. Over the last, it's apparent here, but it already started like a year or a few years maybe back, that we are really now beginning to look at the whole picture. So this is kind of what we experienced here in other, the Bard College conference last year. It was really kind of connecting across these looking at the whole set of acupuncture points that we need to focus on simultaneously in order to transform the system. It's not an either or. And it's really about kind of connecting these dots, also in terms of relationships and movements and frameworks. So that's a third observation. A fourth one is, the evolution of the framework, the underlying framework, so that at the end of the day, what we see in the economy is an embodiment of our thinking. So what happens in the world is really an embodiment of what we teach in, in business schools. And kind of, so thinking creates the world. So changing the economy, changing without economic theory is just, is not going to work. So that the evolution of economic thought and the realization that all so-called laws of economics are just made up based on the assumption on a current, on a particular state of consciousness. In the case of neoclassic economic theory, ecosystem awareness, and that the moment, as in all social science, so there is no natural law in any social science or economic science, it's all based on the assumption that the consciousness of the participants is unchanged. The moment you change the consciousness from ecosystem to ecosystem awareness, in that moment the economic laws melt and reconfigure as a different set. And that kind of more vertical economic thinking that we say, hey, so okay, on that level of awareness it looks that way. That are the laws, and that are the. But then, if you shift the consciousness, which in all change episodes we do, that's kind of the leader's job today. Then, kind of another set of principles and laws, and also institutional designs apply. So that's. Really looking at economic transformation from the viewpoint and the economic evolution and from the viewpoint as an embodiment of an evolving consciousness. I think that's another one that begins to come into focus, and the phrase from ecosystem to ecosystem awareness puts the focus on that. It says at the end of the day, to really bring about change means to change the level of consciousness that the people in the system are operating from. And that's kind of not, it's not something that, that happens at the margin of the system. That's the key leadership challenge today for everyone. I mean, it's something that's already mainstream in all our challenges. We are not framing it in that way because our thought is still stuck in 19th and 20th century economic frameworks. It hasn't caught up with the reality that we face in this century. So that's this kind of evolution of economic thought as an evolution of consciousness is another topic, I think, that's coming into focus, and that maybe gives us another leverage point moving forward by way of kind of connecting the dots. And then, of course, the real question is, okay, and how do you do that? Kind of how do you move through this from ego to eco? And, what we are probably all and what many of you commented on, kind of with the transformation, it takes a journey, kind of in a journey that essentially is a journey about doing some inner work that involves kind of the cultivation of three instruments: the open mind, the open heart, and the open will. And the open mind really is the capacity to suspend old habits of thought, to look with fresh eyes. And the open heart is the capacity to empathize, to look at a situation kind of through the eyes of another partner, of another stakeholder. And open will is the capacity to let go and to let come. So I would like to now, as we deepen this conversation, invite Matt and Eileen to share a little bit about their experience in this territory, so that we just named, that we just described in our check-in. So what's your experience there, and what does it take to really connect to the deeper level of who we are as human beings and kind of and what we do as entrepreneurs. And how do we do that for ourselves? How do we do that to others, with others? And then after that, so after these two stories, maybe we have a little interaction, then we would like to invite you to explore these same questions yourself by applying these principles on your own experience. So we're kind of walking you through a practice, a presencing practice that allows you to actually experience kind of some of this inner leadership work, and then take that as a point of departure for the second part of the session. So with that, let me turn it over to Matt and invite you to share a little bit about your work, who you are, and kind of what your experiences are in operating in this domain. And this is probably a good moment to switch the screen to the other computer.
So I thought we were going to be talking more about measuring gross national happiness and everything specifically about how we do it at Etsy. So I prepared some slides kind of about that. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to tell quickly the story of Etsy and a little bit about what I do there and how I got there, because I think it's been really interesting, actually, and it's exciting to have people like Susan here because, you know, someone gave me a copy of Small is Beautiful in 2008, and it completely changed the way that I thought about the company. So it's really exciting to now be getting to meet people like you all in this space, because we weren't coming from this space at all when we were starting the company. So this is where we started at. Oh, you can't see this. It's a wonderful picture. And if anyone has questions, please feel free to interrupt or just ask them. Maybe not. Let me talk about Etsy. So we are a marketplace for handmade and vintage goods. The way it works basically is that we're a platform, and 900,000 small businesses sell the stuff that they make on our site. So we basically just provide the infrastructure, payments, the marketplace, and bring about 25 million people there, or 50 million people a month, actually, to the site. And I'll show you a slide in a second that just kind of talks about the growth of the company. But when we started out in 2005, I think the small businesses on the site sold about $300,000 or $400,000 of stuff. And this year they'll do 1.5 billion. So it's grown quite a lot from our humble beginnings in this apartment. So yeah, but Etsy, the business itself has been the same since the first day in terms of how it works for us. We take 3.5% of each transaction. So the rest of it goes back directly to the people behind the products. And that's another important piece of what Etsy is about, is that you have to be the person who's bringing the product out yourself. So it's about having that direct connection and that transparency into commercial exchange. So I'll just keep going without the slides. So 2005, a guy named Rob Kalin, who I'd show you a picture of if I had the slides, was my roommate. And we lived in a neighborhood in Brooklyn called Fort Greene. And I was a musician and a screen printer. He was making these handmade wooden computers, and which I would show you a picture of. If we get these up, I'll show you them. They're pretty cool, actually. He'd been to like 5 colleges at this point and done a little bit of everything. Oh, okay, cool, thanks. So he wanted to actually sell these things that he made online, and he was going to go to eBay, but he was like, it's like eBay's so brutal. Like, I don't want to put something that I care about onto this platform. So he looked around. He was going to build his own website, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to build a website for everybody who's making stuff, because these are vestiges of these people, and they want to present them in a way that's meaningful. So that was the idea for Etsy. He got 2 programmers from NYU that he kind of knew. Actually, one quick Rob anecdote that's pretty funny is that Etsy is actually only the 2nd website he made. The first website was for our landlord's restaurant, and Rob had no money to pay the rent. And he went down to our landlord's office and saw that there was a proposal for a website for his restaurant that was exactly twice the amount of money that Rob owed in rent. And he's like, I'll do it for half that. And so he got the job and taught himself HTML. And then he made Etsy. And that's where he met the two programmers, because he wanted animated flames. Anyways, so then he made the very odd choice of saying, hey, why don't you do marketing at Etsy? And I was like, I know nothing about marketing. He's like, that's why you'll be great at it. And I actually think that's true, too, because the more I learned about marketing, the more brutal I found it. And the more I'm like, why would anyone want to do that? So that's how I came onto the company. And really from the very beginning, I just kind of did what I did with the band, which was go town to town, build audiences, and build community. And we had very limited funds then, so if I could spend $10,000 on marketing, like the least creative thing I could do would be to buy an ad in like one magazine. So instead I focused on how do we actually create lots of small grants to help these local communities get going, these communities of artists on Etsy. So that was something that we started in 2006. It was the Teams program. Now there's 300,000 active members around the world. So these are groups of artists who create almost kind of like a new guild system, all pretty organically. Oh, okay, that's the apartment. Could you just hit the play button? Okay, thanks. And then that's our apartment. That's Rob. The next slide. That's the computer. So these, he would make these wooden cases, and then he'd solder all the stuff inside and put these lucite lids on the top. So that was where the idea of Etsy came from. If you could go to the next slide, please. Here's a quick look at our stats right now. You can keep going if you don't mind. Sorry that I can't advance this myself. Okay, so here's what it was. 200,000 in 2005, about 900 last year, and about 1.5 billion this year, we think. Which is exciting when you think that this is obviously not what we make, by the way. This is what the economic activity on the website is. But what we realized when we looked a little bit more deeply at this is that like all of these numbers are great and like, wow, we're making a lot of money, this is awesome, we're creating all this economic opportunity for people. What was really important, and I think what makes Etsy special, is it's people. And it's the fact that there's a real person behind every single product on these things. And this is something that I'm reminded of every time that I go out and meet Etsy sellers and hear about the impact Etsy's had in their life or whatever it may be. And something happened actually, if you could go to the next slide, in 2009 or 10, and actually Judy was here at this. This was the first Etsy event we ever produced, and it was not long after I'd read Small is Beautiful and books like Deep Economy by Bill McKibben, where I started thinking much more about what Etsy was doing and being like, oh wait, this is kind of what I'm hearing about and reading about when I read Buddhist economics. Like, this is about a big number of small things rather than a small number of very big things, and this is about distributed, lateral, human scale economies, all of this stuff. And I was like, whoa, it's totally what we're doing. And so it was like a real big light bulb moment for me, where we stopped thinking about the company just as, okay, we're a marketplace for handmade goods, and more about, we can actually help usher in this new economy by empowering all of these small businesses. And so through business itself, we think we can actually do something transformative in the world. And so we put on this conference, and it wasn't about like, how to craft or things like that. It was much more kind of an economic conference than anything else, and thinking about, actually, could you advance one slide? This is what we wrote about. This is how we described the conference. And it totally changed the way that we thought about the company. So around this time, I actually rewrote the mission of the company. If you could go one more slide. And this is Etsy's mission as a business. So how can we use business to help build this lasting and fulfilling world? And I think lasting and fulfilling are words that I chose carefully, because fulfilling means not just measuring success in economic terms, but in making a life, not just making a living. The amount of time you can spend with your family, how connected are you to your community, these kinds of things. Because those are the things that are, as I think you all agree, are the more meaningful things in the world. And lasting, really from an ecological point of view, because if we don't have community, we're totally screwed. So a lasting world is a connected world, and I think business can play a role in that. And I think, actually meeting Judy at Hello Etsy, I always think about a quotation that was maybe on the poster from the BALLE conference last year about how business can be beautiful in your new book, which I'm excited to read. I haven't read it yet, I'm sorry. But I do think business can be beautiful, and it can play a part of this. So just quickly, last year, actually 1 year ago, yesterday, we became a B Corp, which is exciting. There's starting to be new forms of business, I think, that reflect the shift, kind of what the person from Wharton was talking about. Could you go one more slide? And then what I do at Etsy. So this came out of the B Corp process. I think you probably all are a little bit familiar with B corporations. To become a certified B Corp, you have to score 80 on a scale of 200, and we got 80.1. So we were like, we thought we were like pretty good company too, and it turns out it's a lot harder than we realized. We organized a B Corp hack day where everyone stopped what they were doing, and we worked as a company on different solutions to actually, what can we do to improve in the areas where we scored really poorly, especially around a lot of ecological stuff. We just weren't measuring a lot of stuff. So out of that, we realized that as the company was getting bigger, we needed to really devote resources within the company to making sure that we were, keeping it real. So I created a team called Values and Impact. That's what I do at Etsy. And it's really about giving people in the organization the resources they need to make mission, vision, values aligned decisions themselves. And then inspiring them to use them, to actually do something about it. So that's how we work. We actually do a lot of data measurement, things like, we call it gross happiness index. We did a lot around, I think, or maybe, I've never heard of another company like ours we just calculated the ecological footprint of our marketplace, meaning all of the packages that travel all around. And then we give that data to the people who work on search and say, hey, if a package is traveling priority mail over 800 miles, it's actually got a much larger carbon footprint than one that's not. So how can we surface products in search that are actually more ecologically responsible than others? So there's lots of interesting things that you can do with that data. So that's how we think about it. So the kind of 3 key ways we work, this is what I call teach a man to fish. I think a lot of the problems with CSR at big companies has always been it's this sideload thing, and we're Coca-Cola, but we give a lot of money to art, but their product is still selling sugar water. Not to pick on Coke, but whatever. So I was thinking, yeah, why not? I think the future of values-led business is the enterprise itself is about creating more value in the world than it takes from the world. And so I think the same way we don't want to silo responsibility in the organization, we take an approach of distributing it across the organization. So that was actually kind of another light bulb moment I had recently, where once we'd calculated the full ecological footprint of our operations, I set goals like, okay, we're going to increase the amount of trash we divert from landfills to this %, and we're going to reduce carbon by this %, we do all this, and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And then I realized, I'm like, actually, these shouldn't be my goals. These should be everybody's goals. So how do I get everybody in the company to make them their goals, and then figure out how their work can actually contribute to reducing these things? The other piece that's really important is sharing things, making it very open. So one of the projects we're working on right now that I'm really excited about is called Open Impact. And it's going to be a platform, hasn't launched yet, but it'll be online, where businesses, any business, can put up their data. So, for example, we worked with the University of Pennsylvania to create this gross happiness index, which I'll show you in a second. And every business should be able to use that if they want. So we're going to put that up there. Any business can download it, do it with their employees, change it, put their version up, put another one up. So it's kind of like open source software, but for impact. And that's the idea, is that, kind of to the first point, if you give people the tools, then your impact can be much, much higher. And the last thing that I think is also kind of relevant to today is keep it real always is one of Etsy's values. It's kind of a vague one, but I like it too. because you kind of know when you're not keeping it real, you know, but it's hard to say like what it means, you just know. But there's a little bit of a pun here, is that, you know, measuring gross happiness, for example, is great, but it only really matters if it's, in the end, it's about impact on a real person's life. Like, if people are happier. It doesn't matter if we have this score, like that's great, now we have to do something with it. So that's the last part of kind of all of our work. So give people the tools, share it widely, and then make sure that we're really measuring impact on real people. So this is a shot from the Gross Happiness Index. We made it up. So like, is 7.67 good? Like, I don't know. Seems pretty good. It's out of 10. It's like a C+. But you know, it was a start at trying to quantify this thing. So we looked at a few different areas and then added all up the scores and then divided it by 4. Well-being is probably actually the most scientifically rigorous part of this. We worked with the University of Pennsylvania Center for Positive Psychology. They're doing a lot around the science of well-being. And so we actually have benchmarks for the well-being part, and we're working with them still to develop this even further. And so actually, our employees have a higher sense of well-being than the average person, so that's good. Could you go to the next slide? But I think, oh, this was just interesting. Men and women, there wasn't a big disparity here in score within the company. Could you go to the next one? But this is where it started to get interesting, where we looked at the various places we have offices. We started then looking at all of the teams and saying, well, why is the well-being of the payments team or of Hudson much higher than the office in Brooklyn? And if you've been to Hudson, you probably know why. It's lovely, but they also have the worst ecological footprint, which was interesting just because it's a huge space with not a lot of people in it. So anyways, this started to be the kind of data that we could actually do stuff. So could you go to the next slide? So we did it by every single team too. And then we went and we worked with each team. We said, okay, you know, for some reason, like, marketing is kind of bummed out. Like, you don't want to be a marketing person in Paris at Etsy. I know, I would think that would be nice, but I have been a marketing person at Etsy in Paris, and it's not so bad. But anyways, you know, what we focused on instead was like, why are people on marketing sad? And to my credit, I wasn't running the marketing team at this point. It actually, you know, it turns out that a lot of it was, you know, a lot of management changes, a lack of definition and role, things that, you know, we could identify. But what we did instead was actually focus on the teams that were doing really well and said, well, what can we learn from them? Like, why are the people on this team feeling great? And so, you know, we've taken that data and then we developed training programs, like learning and development programs for managers to learn from the other teams in the organization. We're moving now towards real-time measurement of this stuff. Oh, one thing I should add, we also looked at all of this across performance. So we looked at what were qualities of performance. And it turns out that the higher performing people in the company also had higher sense of social capital, like spent more time with other people, volunteered more. So all of this stuff is great. Like, the things that you would think would be true are true. You know, if you actually create a greater community in your organization or connect it more to the neighborhoods where your offices are, people are happier and they do better. They do better at work. So it's really nice when you have this kind of quantified stuff. If you're like, you know, luckily my boss, the CEO, is pretty enlightened and just lets me do this stuff. But if you worked at a place where you didn't have that, you know, you can make the argument that, like, well, this will actually help our bottom line too by connecting our business more to the community. So I think I'll just stop there. Any questions? About 450 now. 320 in Brooklyn, and the rest are, we've got some offices in Europe and in Hudson, New York, and a small office in San Francisco. That's the next step, actually. So kind of like also on theme with what we've been talking about today, it's like, let's get our own house in order, but with an eye on then extending that outward. So we're transforming our office in Hudson to solar completely because it's well suited for it. But we think about it as, well, how powerful would it be if we could help all the 900,000 small businesses on Etsy go to solar? So it's always about extending to the network because one, I think that's the only way we can do this stuff in time, right? To get the change that we need to be able to tap into these big networks quickly. Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, so, we definitely encountered that with the B Corp stuff too. We had to go through the board. Hindsight being 2020, like I wish well, if I had gone to business school, we wouldn't have taken 3.5%. We would have figured out a more lucrative model. But no, I think that, if we could have done it differently, we would have been more thoughtful about who we took money from. We would have started as a benefit corporation, a lot of different things that, if I'd known then. Turns out we have a pretty enlightened board, so there hasn't been a lot of pushback, but I think that the most important thing is that we're successful. So they're like, we don't care if you do this stuff because you're successful. And I think that the most important thing Etsy can do is to be a benefit corporation, create shareholder value, but not without compromising our values. Because if we show that you can do business this way, you can make money for the people who you gave money to, create a lot of value for other people, and do it in a way that's actually trying to maximize the social, ecological, and economic impact that you can have, maybe those people who are at Wharton right now will be like, oh, you can do this. So I think we just got to stay successful. Yeah, good question. Well, it'll certainly be announced on Etsy. The goal with Open Impact is actually to make it an independent organization that we're going to fund to start it. And then the hope is that it'll be self-sustaining in some way. We would get other businesses involved. So anyone who's a business should get involved. Where it stands right now is that we're developing the prototype with all of Etsy's data. And then we're, in July, going to kind of start to take it around to other people and get them on board. And then I don't know what's going to happen. So I would say check Etsy in September. Yep. So I'm sure you guys could tell me more. I think Bhutan looks at 172 data sources or something like that. We're looking at 4 right now. So for the first GHI, we just did a big company survey. We had 90% of the company participate in it. It wasn't mandatory, but it was kind of mandatory. What we're moving right now is towards continuous measurement. I think that there's limitations to that one snapshot in time. The PermaScore that the University of Pennsylvania developed is created in such that it's not about measuring your state at that moment, but your overall well-being. So what we're moving towards is what other signals can we look at? How can we measure things in an ongoing basis so it's not like this once-in-a-year snapshot? And one of the things that's pretty cool is that we're working with a company called Practically Green right now, and I don't know if you know them, but we're developing a custom dashboard for Etsy employees that basically gamifies positive social and ecological behavior, but we're also creating challenges that we think will actually raise well-being based on the University of Pennsylvania's research. So what we're going to do is we'll have a challenge. Maybe the marketing team has challenged the payments team to volunteer 5 days a week, 5 hours a week or something like that. And there's a game. They compete against each other. But what we're going to do is after they complete the challenge, we're going to ask them questions like, how did this do? How did that do? And that's all going to be tied into the same science behind the well-being stuff. We're not there yet, but that's where we're going. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. So next, I would like to hand it over to Eileen and invite her to share a little bit about her journey and her work and what is it that kind of inspires you to do the work you are doing.
Thanks, Otto. Waiting for them to set up my slides. I guess I see the future here for me. This is the very first time I've ever given a slide presentation. Yes. So let's hope it works. I was panicking when Matt was up there thinking, oh my God, I hope this doesn't happen with my slides, because now I can't remember what I'm supposed to say. Can't get dependent on these things. So anyway, hi everybody. waiting. So there you go. This is a kind of a strange title. Okay, I'll try to make it quick. Okay. All right. Well, usually we start with a moment of silence. Should we do that, or have we had enough? Oh, yes. Okay, we'll have a moment. Yvette, will you do it? I brought my chime, and I left it in my suitcase in the room. God. Anyway, so Yvette, will you lead this? Okay. We use all kinds of things at the company.